model. We basically never even reached the point of being underground because we barely existed. But anyway, the whole thing was centered around RISD and Brown. And, you know, we listened to bands like Test Department and Stirs and Neubaut and Throb and Gristle, and we all sort of wanted to sound kind of like that with the hardcore scene that was up there. So, first of all, we took ourselves really seriously. Like, we were going to change the freaking world, and we were going to do it by smashing things and banging on metal. So, to give you an idea, our first show was in a stairwell. Basically, there was a disused stairwell in some semi-abandoned building. It was a big concrete shaft. Half the band was on the first floor, the other half of the band was on the fourth floor. We let the band in, and unbeknownst to me, one of us went, we let the audience in sort of in the middle. I think our idea was to do like a vertical stereo. But unbeknownst to me, one of the band members locked them in. And then we started playing. So we're actually banging on the stairwell that they were sitting on. And the show was a success, absolute success. I mean, we all left with hearing damage, but like suddenly people like knew about us. Furthering that, the second show, of course, was somewhere just as bad. It was in an abandoned train tunnel on a huge sheet of ice. We called this a fire ritual because we collected a bunch of Christmas trees, made these huge effigies, and burned them while we banged and made noise. And to make matters worse, I faked my death somewhere in the middle of it. And I guess I should tell you about the lineup. The lineup was myself, Stefan Harshman. I played bass, and I'll qualify that later. The guitarist was Todd Ashley. The percussionist was John Spencer. The singer was, what was his name? Something Fry, John Fry, no. And then the other drummer was Jamie Jobin. Anyway, there's sort of a little, articles come out on this band here and there throughout the many years. And I've read at least half a dozen or more. John Spencer went on to do John Spencer Blues Explosion and a bunch of other things.
Pussy Galore.
Pussy Galore, which was great. I used one of the songs in my films. Todd Ashley went and did Dig Dat Hole, Cop Shoot Cop. But anyway, people who like to look up things ultimately get to this band. So that's about the only reason people still know we exist. We did about 5 shows. Our entire output was a single, really noisy cassette of banging and feeding back. But it was awesome. And I mean, yeah, I can't, if you had to define underground as underground as you can get, I can't imagine it being any other way.
The name again? It was
Shithouse, spelled like Bauhaus, with scary lightning S's in the beginning and the end. Yeah, then we actually got a radio show, which I remember objecting to because I was like, no man, it's too early to sell out, you know? We're not gonna be on the radio. And it was some like local radio station called Noise from Neville. And around that time, because we were so scary, people were saying, oh, you guys are a bunch of Nazis and blah, blah, blah. You know how college campuses are. So I think it was Todd and maybe John Spencer were like, well, let's correct that and just do something like really anti-fascist for the poster to advertise the radio show. So we got it all convoluted and we're like, okay, if they think we're Nazis, we're going to do a swastika backwards like the Indian thing and do all these other things, but still make it look fascist, but also have like the antithesis work in around it. So long story short, we ended up plastering all of downtown Providence with backwards swastikas. And there was like all hell to pay. And we just didn't get it. We're like, but don't you see the message? And Noise from Neville was like, no, you cannot play on this show. And then finally, he said, well, you can play, you just have to change your name. I'm going to pretend I canceled you, and you just change your name and you can play. So we called ourselves from like some porno magazine that was like pinned to my kitchen wall called Knocked Up Teens. It was like women in beehive hairdos and horn-rimmed glasses who were pregnant. So we called ourselves Knocked Up Teens. Eventually we played some art galleries, whatever, but as the year wound through, suddenly there was some kind of cult thing around us. So we actually played one club show, and it was a big event. There was a famous old blues place up there called Lupo's Heartbreak Hotel. Everybody played there who was blues. So it was a punk rock festival on Saturday happening there. And we somehow got this sweet opening spot for 7 seconds. And I still don't know what they sound like, and I'll explain that. So we go on. It's great. Our actual sound finally came together. It's a good show. It was packed. Basically, we had a whole pile of 2x4s, a structure of 2x4s with all kinds of shit, like metal and gas tanks, and, you know, like the sound guy was like, ha ha ha, I never mic'd up a gas tank before, you know, that sort of thing. And it was all like louder than shit. And we do the show and end up sort of spontaneously pushing the entire pile of shit into the audience, dragging mic cables and equipment, and then I'm passing out hammers to the audience, and they're banging, and it was great. And, you know, somewhere in there I realized we're never going to play another club in this town again after this, you know. But anyway, it was a total melee. Apparently 7 seconds, one of the band members punched, I think, our guitarist in the face, Todd, and then we had to get the hell out of there. So that was pretty much shithouse. The whole thing ended with, of course, all of us going in different directions. It was college, right? You know, we're all going to different cities. I ended up getting thrown out of college for one of my films, which is sort of a longer story I won't get into here, and wind up back in New York. So I see this band, underground. See, Perry, I'm sticking with the underground thing, in a basement. And their name is the Bloodsuckers from Outer Space, and they were great. It was just trashy. There was this drag queen who was awesome. And I got to know this guy. Mark Bloodsucker, yes. His name's Mark Laramie. And, but for the purposes of this show, I'm just going to call him Mark Bloodsucker, because that's what everybody called him back then. So anyway, I'm on Avenue A, and he comes up to me and he says, you know, my band broke up, but I'm going to do something new. Do you want to do something? And I was like, great, I loved your band. Yeah, sure, this is going to be great. So you know how these things go. There's a lot of back and forth. And so you end up in a room with 4 guys. And, you know, we just start jamming. I'm doing my wall of noise thing. Everything's like louder than fuck. And I'm like, wow, this is great. We've been together 10 minutes. And this is like, we have our sound. This is awesome, you know? And then Mark was like, stop, you know, okay. All right, so he's like, I have a couple of ideas for some songs. You know, he's like, Steph, turn your, you know, feedback and all your effects off. And I'm like, okay, fine. He's like, yeah, it's, you know, the song goes like this. Like, bass line's really easy. It's just bum, bum, bum. I'm like, okay, you know. And I'm like, and he's like, do it. I'm like, all right, bump, bump, bump. Then what? He's like, okay, yeah, that's the bass line. So I'm like, okay, you know, so I turn up all my shit again, and we start playing. He stops. He's like, no, 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 no. I just want you to sort of play the bass. And I'm like, you know, I got a Fender Precision fretless that goes into a Big Muff, which is some crunchy, noisy analog artifact from the 60s. That goes into a wah-wah pedal. That goes into some other effects box, into a keyboard amp. And I'm like, dude, I'm clearly not here to play the bass, you know. I like, this wall of noise thing we just had was great. He's like, no, 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 we're rehearsing now. I was like, dude, I don't even know how to play the bass. I mean, what are you talking about, you know? I mean, I did sort of know how to play the bass, but I wasn't going to let him know that. Anyway, so kind of as a testament to how many drugs we were doing at the time, we solved the problem in a novel way. He just ended up hiring a second bass player, and we had a band, you know? So we did a bunch of stuff. And I guess the one memorable show, well, I get a phone call, and he's like, Steph, you'll never believe who we're opening for. I'm like, who are we opening for? No, no, no. Guess. You'll never believe who we're opening for. I'm like, I don't know, man, Metallica? He's like, no. We're opening for G.G. Allen. Oh. And somehow he snagged that opening spot. And I'm like, you know, and it was like a big serious week. We actually had a rehearsal. And so day of the show, sound check, he's like, look, everybody has to stay around here. G.G. Allen has a rider where he has to be on at 12 sharp. we're right before him, like, you know, no getting drunk before the gig, like no like running up the block to get a bundle of dope so you sound really good, just we all got to be cool and this is like a big opportunity. I was like, right. So anyway, it was one of those 90s shows where, I forget the first two bands, but there was this band on before us called Thrust, which was a chick band. And I guess they did some kind of crazy performance thing, which I caught out of the corner of my eye, which involved like gallons of fake menstrual blood. So like the drums, the stage, and all the equipment is covered in this goo, right? And I'm like, great, you know? And so it's about 5 minutes away from the end, you know, they're playing their last song, and suddenly Mark's like, where's Neil, the other bass player? And he's like, Steph, give me a quarter. You know, this is before cell phones. He jets to the freaking payphone, and he comes back, he's like, I can't believe it. I was like, Neil, what are you doing? He's like, I'm watching TV, you know? I'm like, no, you know, so anyway, long story short, we managed to do 4 songs before they cut us off. And then it was G.G. Allen, and I knew what a G.G. Allen show was. And so Beowulf, which was the venue we played, was kind of almost wider than it was deep with the stage in the middle. And there are 2 pool tables kind of over here. So I decided I was going to be as far away from the stage as possible, all the way to the audience right side, against the back wall. So I had all that audience, 2 pool tables, a few more people, and me. And I was like, great, I'll watch it from back here. So the show starts, and you know, he's cutting himself, dribbling shit, pissing on people. And then he jumps into the audience, and you know, everybody's like, oh, I got like even more shit on me, you know. And so, and I'm like, see, I'm pretty smart, right? Next thing I know, he jumps on one pool table, bounds to the next pool table, and boom, he's standing right in front of me. And I'm like, I'm gonna die. Or at least I'm gonna have to burn my leather jacket. Same thing, right? And so, yeah, that was that. So anyway, around that time, I guess I started to rethink this being a rock star thing, and I started focusing more on my underground movies, which I'd sort of been doing all along. And it's hard to talk about movies I know nobody's ever seen, because I in fact lost them for 20 years, only to find them again. A friend had saved a master, and I'm still working on putting those out. But I met a lot of cool people. One of my favorite people was Nick Zedd, who recently passed, and that's still a heartbreak to me. But we became good friends, and a lot of people, you know, just used to badmouth him and say, oh, this guy's an idiot, this guy's this. When I finally met him, I was like, we're like pals, you know? And Nick Zedd, specifically Nick Zedd, yeah. And he moved down to Mexico and had a whole life down there, so I didn't see him much for a while. But he came up to sell one of his paintings, and I randomly ran into him at a bar. And he mentioned in passing that he was actually using some of my films. I'd given him a copy of my reel 20 years before to teach in colleges down in like South America and Mexico, which like astonished me, because like nobody up here, like more people in Mexico have seen these films than in this town or in this country, I think. So that was kind of a blast. But anyway, R.I.P. Nick, and I hope to get these films out. I got to find a format where they won't just like forget YouTube. They'll just like, you know, it'll last like 2 hours. And I guess I just want to end with a plug on myself. I'm myself, Matt, and Angie have a project called The Death of Art. Basically, we go into other people's art openings and we drink all their booze and tell it like it is. It's a fun channel, and we do all kinds of things. We've reviewed graveyards, we've, you know, reviewed taxidermists, and it's kind of like a guerrilla art type thing. And check it out. It's called The Death of Art, and there's lots of deaths of art. Like there's a goth band called The Death of Art. So go to the Death of Art channel and have fun. Thank you.